Welcome back to Left, labor education for today. And in this video, we're going to be doing the weekly rundown, a little bit more than what I've normally done in my weekly recap videos. I'm going to focus on 6 stories today, 6 labor updates from the world of work, instead of just the 3 normal stories that I cover in the weekly recap. But like the previous videos, I'm going to be starting with the UAW, which continues negotiations with the big 3 Detroit auto manufacturers, Ford, Stellantis, and General Motors. Right now, negotiations remain ongoing, as do the work stoppages that have been underway by UAW members. Proposed wage increases are now on the table for 23% increases. Originally, the UAW was looking for about 40% wage increases over the life of the contract. Right now, the companies have on the table multiple offers for 23% wage increases, so still a pretty significant delta. And the UAW still says that there's more progress to be made on negotiations. That being said, the UAW has not initiated any additional strike activity since our last report. Specifically on October 11th was when the UAW changed its strategy to more of a surprise strike model, and they hit the Kentucky truck plant for Ford with 8,700 workers surprisingly going on strike before waiting to those regular Friday live stream updates. And so we haven't actually seen any increase in strike activity from UAW since then. We still have 34,000 UAW members on strike, which is approximately 23% of the big 3 union membership. Fain did spend most of this week's live stream focusing on non-union plants and talking about how the fight that the UAW workers are underway with right now is going to make it a lot easier for the UAW to organize non-union plants after those non-union workers see the benefits that come out of these contract negotiations. At the same time, Fain rejected comments from Ford chairman Bill Ford, who had said that the UAW and Ford should not be enemies with each other. Rather, these parties should be joining together to fight against non-union competition. Fain actually rejected these remarks and said that the non-union competition is more of our symbol of the future brothers and sisters of UAW membership, again pointing to the long-term strategy for UAW to tackle some of these non-union companies and make sure that their workers get represented by a union as well. Next, less than 2 weeks after the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers suspended contract negotiations with the Screen Actors Guild, the parties are now set to resume talks this upcoming Tuesday. The actors have been on strike dating back to July of this year when they had joined the Writers Guild of America on the picket lines. The writers have since returned to work and they ratified a new contract on October 9th, but sticking points remain for the Screen Actors Guild in their continued negotiations with the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers. This past week, a high-profile group of actors tried to be part of the solution with a creative proposal that they sent to their union leadership. The proposal, which was brought forward by A-list actors such as George Clooney, Scarlett Johansson, Ben Affleck, Tyler Perry, Emma Stone, a cohort of very high-paid, very successful actors got together and they suggested a proposal that would remove the $1 million union dues cap, allowing the highest-paid members of the SAG-AFTRA union to contribute up to $150 million over the next 3 years. And that would help close the gap between the studios and the unions on some of those key sticking points that keep the actors on the picket lines and prevent any additional movement in the studios' productions that are set to be released for the rest of this year and into the summer of next year. All of those productions currently at risk given the strike activity. Reportedly, according to the New York Times, the Screen Actors Guild did reject that proposal by the actors, but it does suggest that there is some level of restlessness by some members of the Screen Actors Guild, with everybody on both sides trying to think creatively about getting back to work. Third, a story I haven't talked much about. I just read about it for the first time this week, but we saw a tentative agreement reached between the Philadelphia Orchestra and the American Federation of Musicians. Now, these parties have been in contract negotiations for several months. Things were not moving in a positive direction until very recently. Back in August, the American Federation of Musicians had voted to authorize a strike. However, no official strike was called, and by September, the contract was allowed to expire. The parties continued negotiating and again just recently reached a deal as of this week. As part of that deal, the musicians will receive 16% wage increases over the next 3 years. That was one of the main priorities of these negotiations. This was the first negotiations between the parties since the onset of the pandemic, which obviously rocked the Philadelphia Orchestra and its musicians through the cancellation of over 200 performances, which amounted to over $26 million in lost revenue. Next, I wanted to talk about a couple developments regarding casino workers, both in Detroit and in Las Vegas. Starting in Detroit, 3,700 workers represented by the Detroit Casino Council went on strike this week in pursuit of higher wages and better working conditions. According to a statement released by MGM Grand Detroit, quote, regarding the status of our negotiations, we've made 6 proposals to the union, and our current offer includes the single largest pay increase in the history of MGM Grand Detroit. However, the last contract between these parties was finalized in the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, obviously a very different time for casinos and their employees. And as part of that contract, workers were rewarded with 3% wage increases. And with that contract now expired, the Detroit Casino Council is looking for higher wages to keep up with the profits made by these companies coming out of the pandemic. And in a statement released by the Detroit Casino Council, they say that, quote, industry gaming revenues have now surpassed pre-pandemic levels to reach a new record high. In 2022, the Detroit casino industry generated $2.27 billion in gaming revenue and is on track for another record-breaking year in 2023. The 3 Detroit casinos collectively reported $813 million more in total gaming revenues in 2022 than in 2019, but total wages paid to workers represented by the DCC were $34 million less when comparing those same years. And as Detroit casino workers take to the picket lines under their now expired contract, their peers over in Las Vegas are contemplating similar labor activity. Las Vegas-based casino workers are ratcheting up their labor activity with another planned demonstration scheduled for this upcoming Wednesday. Within just the last 2 weeks, although the Las Vegas workers are not formally on strike, unlike the casino workers over in Detroit, the Las Vegas workers did stage an informational picket within the last couple weeks in order to show their solidarity and garner community support. And the parties do continue with their contract negotiations after the previous contract was allowed to expire back in September. So they're also working under an expired contract. But union leadership has suggested that a strike deadline may be imposed ahead of the Las Vegas F1 Grand Prix event in mid-November if a sufficiently compelling contract offer is not presented to workers before then. Moving on, in the last round of Starbucks labor drama, the company is now suing the union, with the union also now turning around and suing the company. On October 9th, during the first week of the Israel-Hamas war, Starbucks Workers United made a post on X voicing solidarity with Palestine, which reportedly prompted thousands of customer complaints to the Starbucks company. And on October 13th, in response, Starbucks sent a letter to Starbucks Workers United demanding that they discontinue the use of the Starbucks name in their union branding, as well as discontinue the use of the green Starbucks Workers United logo. Starbucks Workers United says that the post was not approved by union leadership before making it to the public-facing social media platform, but they also maintain that they've never voiced, including through this post, any support for Hamas or any version of terrorism going on in the Middle East right now. Furthermore, the union says that the company is, quote, seeking to exploit the ongoing tragedy in the Middle East to bolster the company's anti-union campaign. They argue that using the company's logos in its branding and its messaging is well established in the U.S. labor ecosystem, referencing organizations like the Amazon Labor Union and the National Football League Players Association. They also say that the post on X clearly identifies Starbucks Workers United as a labor organization and not as the company Starbucks itself. So while Starbucks is suing Starbucks Workers United for trademark infringement, Starbucks Workers United is countersuing Starbucks for what it is referring to as defamation, saying that Starbucks has implied Starbucks Workers United to be supporting terrorism and violence, where they argue they have not done so even through this recent social media post on X. And so as you can see, there appears to be no shortage of labor strife and dysfunction across all US industries right now, from gaming and hospitality to entertainment, manufacturing, food and beverage. The list goes on. It appears no company or union is safe from the labor unrest. I'll continue to keep you posted through these ongoing videos. I hope you enjoyed this one. I hope you learned something, and I hope to see you again in the next one. Take care.